welcome to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer, also known as KJ Filer. My guest today is best-selling author Lenore Hart. Lenore is a writer, poet, teacher, and editor. She has authored countless novels, including WATERWOMAN, Ordinary Springs, The Raven's Bride, and so many more. She writes under the names Lenore Hart and Elizabeth Graves. She is also series editor of the Night Bazaar, fantastic fiction anthologies. The Night Bazaar is a forbidden market which opens at midnight, closes before sunrise, and appears only for a week. There's so much more to explain, and I'll let Lenore do that, but the trick to it is you have to find it. In volume 1, the bazaar opens in a parking garage somewhere in Manhattan. Volume 2 is set in Venice. Volume 3 is set in London, and there's more to come. Hi, Lenore. It's so good to see you. How you doing?
Hi, great, Kat. Thanks for inviting me.
It's been a while. The premise behind Night Bazaar anthology is a time-traveling exotic bazaar, and I'll let you explain to the readers what that's about.
Well, I mean, it was one of those weird things, like kind of like a gift that comes to you when you're a writer, which I don't get into that. But I was talking to my daughter who lived at the time in Brooklyn. And apparently there at one time for a couple of years, there was this market that kind of popped up in an old abandoned warehouse or something. And they called it the Night Bazaar. And it had tables with things to trade, and it had, magical implements, and it had, I mean, not real ones, but, and it had herbs and people selling food and artworks and crafts and everything. And she said it was really cool because it didn't open till midnight. And then it was open for several hours. And I was dying to go to it. But then I think that was before COVID. And then I think that kind of did for it, so I never got to go. But once Nia had told me about the name of it, I thought, wow, that'd be a great name for a book. And then I thought, of course, I'm sure somebody's already used it. I mean, how could they not, And then I looked, and the only thing that called the Night Bazaar that I could find was a gigantic hotel in Singapore.
Oh,
no
wow.
books. I was like, yes. So I trademarked the name for a series because by then I had talked to my husband, David, who's also a writer. And we had decided, and we talked about it and decided the best use of that, since it was the Night Bazaar, was not to do a novel or even a collection of stories just by me, but rather to make it kind of like a bazaar and have offerings of different stories from different authors and just allow them to kind of run wild. I mean, within reason,
Yeah.
And then I had this character that I used that I'd once created in a short story called Madame Vera, who told fortunes. And I decided she would run the Night Bazaar. Yeah. And she would lead them through the market. So she leads the reader from one story to another, as if they're going from booth to booth in the market. So that's how that works. The other thing is, you cannot get to the market. You can't just find it like there's no a flea market sale sign or something. It's that you have to be invited, and they're always invited in weird ways, like a hand comes out of an alley and grabs them, or a note appears on your desk, and when you look again, it's gone, but it invites people who have things they need to resolve, like a wish or a desire or something they've done wrong, and invites them to give them a chance to see what they'll do with what they're offered there by one of the vendors.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love the series. I know I've read the first and second. And so this is sort of a carnival of the souls.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, it's like people, in some of the cases, it's like it saves their soul. In some of the cases, well, not so much. It just depends on how they react to what they're given there. And of course, you only get one chance. You can't come back. I think there was one exception once at a store. You can't come back. You get one shot at it, that one invitation, and then that's it, because the bazaar only comes to a city once. It stays for 7 days, or rather 7 nights, and each night it appears in a different spot. So you can't go back and find it if you went once. It's somewhere else. And then they leave and they go on to the next city. So we started with New York City, and that was the present day. That was where the Night Bazaar was. And then the next volume was Venice. But and this was so weirdly coincidental. We decided, well, let's set it in an interesting historical time, like old Venice, in the 14th century when the plague arrived. And that was right before COVID came. It was not planned or anything. It was like we had somehow planned it or evoked it or something. It was kind of creepy. And so we did that, where the bazaar is set up in St. Mark's Square in Venice in 1348 when the plague comes. And so some of the stories are about that, but I also allow the authors to set their stories at any time period they want, as long as there's something from the bazaars in the story. And then finally, the third one, which just came out last month, is the Night Bazaar London. And I picked 1880 in London, so because it seemed like a great time for it to be there. So every volume is set in a different place, and they experience that, and they also experience what each author did with the idea of the story, whether it's in the present or the past or even the future. So
how do you pick the cities?
well, I just think of cities we've been to or cities we'd like to go to, and then I go with that. And we did New York just because of the Brooklyn thing, it seemed like a natural way to start. And then when we went back to Venice, we decided that would be where the bazaar originated, the very first one, and that established Manavira, where she came from and everything. And then because we'd been to Venice and we really liked it. And then we thought about the next one. And I hadn't been to London for a long time, but I thought, gosh, what a time. Oh, no, actually, that was David's idea. He wanted it in London. What a time period, because there's Sherlock Holmes, there's Madame Blavatsky, there's just all the, and of course, since it's not, the bazaar itself travels in time and the authors can do that, they're not limited to, just 1880. They can go anywhere as long as somehow something from the bazaar that links it to it pops up in that story. So we've got all kinds of stuff in London, all over the place, weird dolls and strange timepieces. And the only thing I think I said was no Jack the Ripper stories, because our press, we don't encourage and don't accept stories that are about doing terrible things to women or children. We're not into that at all. So I said anything you want except for Jack the Ripper. So he's not in there, but everybody else.
But the genre is horror, right?
That's an interesting thing too. And that's why I think this is a really unique collection. It's called fantastic fiction. And that covers a wide range of genres. It could be speculative, it could be ghost stories, it could be horror, although not the really gross, head exploding kind. It could just be the eerie kind of stuff, or strange, like Shirley Jackson used to write, like with The Haunting of Hill House and her stories, because she's one of my favorite authors. So I think for that reason, it really appeals to readers that might not ordinarily pick up a horror thing and read it, but they'll pick up this. And when they have done so, they're like, God, I don't usually read this, but I really love this. So I think it appeals to a much broader spectrum of readers than just the straight up genre thing, just horror, or just fantasy. It's got fantasy. It's got, there's fairies, but there's also serial killers, but it's got everything in it. So
yeah, I liked it. And I am not typically one to read horror, and so when I looked at whatever the book companies, try to find the bookshelf where they're going to put that book so you can find it, and they said horror, and I thought, I wouldn't have pegged it, not really there. I would have said it's at least cross genre. I mean, I think it, and also when I was reading it, I thought, oh, these are stories that I probably wouldn't have picked up. And I'm really glad that I'm reading an anthology and I get a little taste of some authors that I might have not looked at before. So that was kind of interesting. So who do you think is your ideal reader?
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing too, like what we were just talking about. I mean, ordinarily, when we first started out, I would have thought my ideal reader is like a fantasy reader, but like a dark fantasy or urban fantasy person, or someone who likes, what do they call it? Slipstream, the eerie, odd story where something strange happens. It's not overt horror, it's not overt creepiness exactly, but it's just that feeling that it gives. So I would have thought it was somebody a little more dedicated, probably to the dark fantasy genre. But then when the stories started coming in, they were all over the place. I mean, in terms of what they were doing. And yet I spent a lot of time doing this. I managed to make them all fit, I think, pretty, I mean, you can be the judge of that.
Yeah,
make them fit pretty seamlessly. So it made sense that, we're going to this booth and, look at this item, let's in this story. And then at the next booth, here's this, rusty saber and it's in this story, and here's this weird pocket watch and it's in this story. And so regardless of what happened, whether they were ghostly or eerie or there was some horror, like I like folk horror, for instance, which kind of, it goes into fairy tale type stuff and legends and myth. So you'll see some of that too. There's kind of fairy tale or folklorish things in there as well. And the weird thing is, just like a bazaar, it all works together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just talking to somebody recently who had bought it and was asking me what I would, how I would peg it. And I said, if you like Halloween, you're going to love this. It's just that sort of general, if you're into that whole, dress up and I did say fantasy, dark fantasy especially. Yeah, that's the way I would peg it. So how
Oh,
many?
good.
Yeah,
But the
I was.
holiday, not the movie, right?
Yeah, no, I don't mean the movie. I mean the, dress up and go around. I know so many people, so many friends of mine are Halloween is their favorite holiday, and when you try and peg them on why, it's the same appeal as this book. It's kind of like, well, it's a little spooky and a little bit, different and a little bit magical, and it's not necessarily dark. It's just, because the kids are dressing up as all kinds of things, so it's really, really cool. So,
Yeah, that's perfect because I hand out carnival Halloween type masks when people
yeah,
buy one. I usually hand out masks with them when I'm doing an appearance. So
yeah. So that's yeah, I think that's it. So how many volumes have you published to date?
well, as of December 30th, that makes 3. And so we've got, New York City, we've got Venice, and now we've got London. And I guess I can reveal that the next one is going to be, it won't be out for a couple of years, it'll be set in Tokyo. So I wanted to get away a little bit from like Western European culture and get into something different. So we're going to Asia for that. And
Okay.
Tokyo in the 1990s will be the place. So
Okay, cool.
scary
What
Hello Kitty.
yeah, my daughter will like that one. We were just talking about Hello Kitty, and I thought Hello Kitty was like the name of the brand. It's actually the name of the character, and she's not a cat.
Yeah, something like I think it was another name, but yeah. But that leaves Hello Kitty, karaoke, and all those Harajuku market, the huge platform heels and everything. So I think that'll be pretty cool. And it's fairly recent, so it's not quite as much work on the authors. Well, I guess if they have to know about Tokyo, but they won't have to go back to like the 14th century to figure out what would have happened or what they would be eating or something. So
Yeah. So I think it's also not only are they interesting kind of spooky stories, but also it's an interesting way of discovering the location. I think you did a really good job in the first two for sure, and I'm reading the London one now. So yeah, I think that's another appeal for people. And do they have to be read in chronological order?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I just want to say though, I'm so glad because setting is my big thing in fiction. I love the setting, and when people go into setting, I love it. I try not to overdo it, but if I, really captured it, that's good because with each book, I want it to seem like the place, not just a story set anywhere, but it's actually there. So you said chronological order. No, they do not. That's another great thing about this anthology, which I think is not always the case with most anthologies. You really do have to, especially if they're themed or the same characters, or you do have to read them in order. And often I knew that was a problem because often people come across anthologies like in the middle. The first one they see is like
Yep.
number 3 or something. And I thought, okay, I definitely don't want this to be like somebody gets number 5 and they're like, what's going on here? Who are these people? So I made sure that it really does not matter what anthology you pick up. You can pick it up and read it and you'll understand, because somewhere in the process, often in my little introduction where Madame Vera introduces the reader and starts taking them around for the stories, it makes clear who she is and what the bazaar is for. So there's never any need for the reader to think, what is going on here? They always know that, and they always know who she is and where they're going and what they're doing. So anywhere you can do it anywhere. Start anywhere.
Yeah, and I think so can you tell us a little bit more about Madame Vera? Why did you pick her? She seemingly is immortal.
Yeah, that's me. No, not really. That's me. If I was going to be somebody like, a little less than human or a little more, I guess I would be Madame Vera, because you may have noticed that she has red hair. So,
I have noticed that.
we certainly share that much. That's about all. Because she was born, apparently, I mean, we're not even sure about this, but she first turned up in Venice, and we think she's Greek, but who knows? Nobody knows. In the 14th century, she turned up there, and she had the very first Night Bazaar in St. Mark's Square during the Christmas holiday there. And then after that, she left, took off because of the plague, and then they just started popping up all over the world. So that's how that happened. So she's kind of based on a character that I once wrote when I was studying writing in my MFA program. I wrote a short story about someone called Vera, and she became a fortune teller. She had a really bad life. She became a fortune teller And she really did have kind of magic, even though it was more of a general, like a literary story. And I really loved that character. And then I did a project where I put it up on the internet, for my final thing. And I had her singing and doing different things. And I just hated to let go of the character, but not until we got to the Night Bazaar in Brooklyn, and I heard about it, did I realize that that's where she belonged. So it was so exciting because like 25 years later, I figured out what to do with this character. She runs the bazaar, of course. I just didn't realize that 25 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant way of guiding the reader from chronicle to chronicle too, because she's the thing. I mean, you kind of establish a relationship with her in the beginning. You kind of know what you're going to get out of her, and she's a little creepy at first, but then you figure out you can actually kind of trust her. She's there to help you out, really, but she is mysterious. So
yeah, she's kind of cool. not immoral. She's kind of amoral in a way that she doesn't like.
Yes,
she doesn't direct everything. She sort of sets things in motion to let them happen, and then she's not responsible for the outcome really. But she picks the people who come to the bazaar. So it's kind of interesting how she does that. I'm still not sure, but she does. That's what she does.
Does she actually issue the invitations, or are the invitations separate, like they just appear on their own?
Well, I mean, it's kind of, sometimes they don't really come in the mail. I think sometimes they come in the mail, but mostly it's like something appears or somebody finds it, and it's always odd, like it's on a piece of parchment, and when they read it and then they set it down, and when they come back with their tea, all the writing's gone or the whole thing is gone, or somebody, kind of gestures, into this alley, come in here, and then they hand them something and it tells them they've been invited, where it is and what time, and this is your only chance, to get what you desire. And it's always been the person that was picked is always someone who just then has a desire. They're trying to either gain something or avoid something, or they're about to do something bad, or, something is, and this is what forces them to act. And then you see how they end up using, if they use it wisely, what she gives them, and they might get some kind of magical implement, or they might get some kind of help with something, or they might just be put in a situation that they have to finally resolve this issue, whatever it is.
Yeah. So she's very cool. I really like her. I think that was a brilliant part of it too. Initially, in the first one, when I read the first one, I thought she's going to be a very interesting character. I wonder what you're going to do in the next one. And when she was in the next one, I thought, oh, good, I know her. I can trust her. I'll go with her. We're good.
So yeah, the only thing she does, you can't predict is she does change her appearance sometimes. She's still tall and she still has long, but sometimes she has darker hair. Sometimes she looks a little younger, or a little older, but you can always tell it's her. She's just slightly different often when you see her.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said a little bit about London and 1880s. Do you want to expound on that? Why did that appeal to you?
Well, I've always liked, like I said, we went to London many years ago. I haven't been there lately, but I was really intrigued by all the little buildings and the small towns, and they kind of leaned in. And, I thought, at night, these places are kind of creepy, even though there was nothing really going on, but they look like there should be something going on. And I studied British literature in college. And so I knew a lot about Anne Boleyn and, some of their wars and the different kings. And they just have, I hate to give them this because, we did kind of try to get rid of them, but you can't really get rid of them,
No.
And we can just kind of enjoy them from a distance now. And I thought, well, there's so many cool things there. There's so much history. So I decided to use that. And so my story, for instance, kind of takes advantage of both British history and the time travel aspect, because my own story, which is set, it opens in the time of Anne Boleyn, and Anne Boleyn is in the very first section, living and everything before she's about to be executed. And then it opens up after that in 1880 with a raven who's one of the ravens at the Tower of London, because, there's a flock of ravens that are kept there. And the myth is if the ravens ever leave, the king or queen will die and the kingdom will fall. But this raven actually talks to the reader, and does things really. She's kind of like a little thug, and she robs the tourists as they come in, steals their food and stuff. And then finally, there's a shop girl in Carnaby Street in 1967 in the next section. And then I had to bring them all together. So I did one story that's operating in 3 different time periods. And in the middle of it, I thought, how am I going to do this? I'm not sure. What did I do here? This should have been a novel, but I did manage to pull it off. So, I get to play with things like that. And I loved, the whole 60s, the Carnaby Street thing. And I thought, I'm going to get everything I like. This is my chance to get everything I like about London in one story. And I did it, although it was a little precarious at times, but I managed to do it. So that's a lot of the reason why I chose that.
I don't know where you pick your authors, how you get your authors, if they're by invitation or if they're people but I have to say the collection is always complete. Like they were the group that should have been together. The stories all, even if they're not exactly at the same time, or if they kind of wander a little bit, they all go together. So, and that is a testament to you as an editor. You're picking good people. And I love that kind of thing anyway, because as a reader, I have, just so much time for reading. And if I get invested in a novel, it's one of those things where you have to commit. So I have to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to read this. How long is it going to take me to read this? I'm going to love it, but I still have to have the time, or I'm just going to be frustrated. But with an anthology, you get to read something, and you can do that in an evening. You can do that, sit down, one session and read one story. But what I also like is I've discovered a whole bunch of authors I had never heard of before. So yeah, I thought that was a really great way to do that. It's sort of like, I don't know, I think we talked about this. It's like a sampler, chocolate sampler.
Yeah, like a chocolate box.
Yeah, but they all have sampler. But they all have to go together, though. So yeah,
right, yeah, because you don't want the one where you're like, "Ew, I don't like this caramel." Yeah. It is a lot of work actually to make them go together sometimes. Although they've got their marching orders. I mean, that's another thing I guess that's different about this anthology. Is often an anthology is just like a collection of stories in the genre of horror, and then that's it. They're not connected in any way, which is fine. But a lot of people, especially nowadays, I think they like things with a theme that kind of fit together. Even if they're different, it sort of fits together. So that was another reason I wanted to do it. But it is interesting. I mean, you would not believe, I spend hours sometimes with index cards rearranging the stories to say which one goes here and which one goes here, and like, nah, and doing it all over again. It does take, you can't see it. I hope you can't see the work, but it takes a lot of time just to figure out what order they're going to come in. And then I write the little intros that go in between them. And then I think, well, this is what I want, though. I want to have an anthology, which has a smaller audience than novels. People like novels usually better, but I wanted to see if I could create an anthology that would kind of have the effect of a novel, that it would go together so well that it would feel like you were reading a novel about that time and place, so that it would make everybody happy, the novel readers, the story readers, but it's easier to read it, as you said, in little bites, like chocolates out of a box.
Yeah. And you've done a really good job. They all actually go together very well. And I do like the order. It's funny because I was going to ask you about that. If you spend some time, or if you just take them how they come in, because it flows very well. This stopped, and now she takes you on to the next thing, and you might still be thinking about that, but you're ready for whatever comes next. It's really, So, yeah. So, do you put any restrictions? Well, you said this a little bit, but are there any real hard restrictions on the events or the characters or anything like that?
Well, I want I want the writers to use their imagination, and go wherever they want to go. But I do put just a few restrictions. I mean, like word restrictions, for instance. This one time somebody sent me a story that was 16,000 words long.
Oh, Lord.
That's the beginning of a novel. And I had to help them cut it down by half. And it was like, never again. So I do try, I say, now we want stories that fall, probably between 3,000 words and 7,000 words. Well, they never listen. And they're almost always longer. But I think that kind of makes them kind of be more conservative, only go 1,000 or 2 words over instead of doubling that, to that size. So there's the length restriction, because I'd have an enormous tome. I mean, it would be huge if I just let them, it would be fun for them to do that. But so I try to keep the length, to a reasonable length. And I tell them that my character, Madame Vera, I said, it's my character. You can put her in the story, she can walk through it or do something or talk or whatever, but you cannot use her as your protagonist, because the first time people tried to do that, I didn't even know they were going to do it. And she was different, but not in a good way. And some of them she was evil, and some of them she was just weird. I mean, I said, no, I'm reserving her. She's my character. She can be in your story, but she can't be like your point of view character, your main character. So that's another restriction. And then the restriction, of course, that the story has to be connected, even if it's in the present day and the bazaar is in, 1348 Venice. There has to be a clear connection between the old Venice and the present day. You know, that maybe the family inherited an object from that bazaar and it's been passed down, you know, even through generations or whatever. That works fine as long as that clear connection is there. Those are, I think, probably the only restrictions that I've got.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that everything seems to go together so well. And also for readers, I know almost nobody who's listening has any aspirations of being an author, but just to stick this in your head, readers, it's really interesting putting together short stories, and it's a completely different way of writing too. If you write novels and then you switch to short stories, like you said, you end up with 16,000 words in a heartbeat, and then you're like, wait a minute, that's not the assignment. We're trying to do something for a collection, not all on my own. So yeah, it's a little like herding cats, isn't it?
Sometimes, yeah. Or it's like the box of chocolates, but one chocolate is the size of a whole chocolate cake. It doesn't really fit into the box, you know. So
yeah,
you have to do a little slicing away at that cake. So
yeah, that's so funny. Have you guys ever gotten together, your authors?
Well, yes, we did have we had a launch for the first book that was, I used to teach at Wilkes University, and we had a book launch there, and everybody dressed up. We decorated the whole place we rented the big room in the hotel, decorated it like the Night Bazaar, actually got local people to come in and be vendors and sell things. They were dressed like fairies and demons, and we had a juggler. We had a contortionist. We had various things going on, and the lights were low, and I had all these lights strung around. So it really did look like a bazaar. I thought that was pretty cool. The next one, of course, came out during COVID, so we couldn't do anything like that. So, but I would like to do something. I haven't done anything yet with this one because in January, February, you keep getting events, and they keep getting canceled. So I'm waiting till spring to really gear up and do something. So I'd like to do something along those lines too, again, because everybody loved that. There was music, there was food, you know, exotic food. They really liked it.
Yeah. I don't know why more of the events like that don't do some sort of theme. It's just general. It's like going to a bookstore, and there's just all kinds of things. I guess there's something for everyone. But I know I've been to a couple of events where they're bringing people in. There was one event I went to. They were bringing people in from a retirement home, and the main author that was there, that was to do with the signings and did the gala and all that kind of stuff, was a young adult author. And I thought, I'm really not too sure that the people from the retirement home are going to be into the Hunger Games, but who knows? I don't know.
So, maybe it broadened their horizons. I mean, young adult novels are so much more complicated and well written now than I think they used to be, you know, long ago. That they do hold adult interest sometimes, but yeah, that is kind of an odd venue. But then again, maybe they can check them out from the library or try them out. So maybe that would give them something new. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think authors have to really kind of up their game now, because people are no longer, I mean, at least as far as I can tell, people are no longer, I mean, 20 years ago, I could have a book signing, just a signing, and people would turn out, you know, just nothing going on, but buy a book and I write on it, you know, that was enough for them. But now I think it's like there's so many things going on and people just expect more. And so I think you have to do a panel with 3 authors, or you have to have a party, or you have to have some food or some reason besides just the book and the signing to bring people out, which is okay. In a way, it can be more fun then. It can be more like a party. But yeah, I think it does take more than just saying, I'm signing books and they're selling books and, you know, why don't you come? And people are like, I can get them on Amazon, you know, so you have to kind of work a little harder, I think, to get people to come out.
Yeah. Well, I think your theme thing was brilliant. So yeah.
Well, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. So is there a question that I have not asked that you wish that I had?
I don't think so. I guess that if you ever think of a good place for me to set one, though, let me know, because I'm always open to new city suggestions. I can pick your brain for what it's like there or something. Because you know, like I've got Tokyo planned, I think, and then maybe Dublin next. But after that, it's kind of open. So let me know if you think anything.
Okay. All right. Well, Lenore, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Readers, as always, I'll post the links below so you can find Lenore, her work, and keep up with her latest passion project. Also, please have a look around at the other interviews, and you'll likely find your next to be read. Also, please click the link to nominate your favorite author for an interview on Writer to Writer. And please remember to hit the like and subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Lenore, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it. Yeah. We'll have to get together soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Talk about some more cities.
Absolutely.